The word is equivalent to the DNA and the gene. It is a simplified, generalized packet of data, of information, of memory passed on from the transmitter to the recipient. In order for the transmission to be effective, the recipient has to be of the same kind as the transmitter. Otherwise, there will be no transmission. It will not have an effect. For instance, a organism can only transmit its genes, its memories, its the sum of all its nurturing to another of its own species. It cannot transmit it to another of another species. This is, if we can use a metaphor of the computer has to have the same software and the same language. The computer has to speak the same, the two computers involved in the exchange have to speak the same language. Or the transmitter has to instill in the recipient the way of decodifying the code it will then transmit. Otherwise, the recipient will not, the receiver will have no way of comprehending, of deciphering the code. Therefore, the word as mimetic code has a range of effect. It can only have can only influence organisms that share a language. It cannot influence nature directly, or others who don't other organisms who don't speak the language uh, directly. For instance, if you want to have the word to have an influence over another species like a dog, which is trainable, you have to teach it to associate the sequence of sounds, which is the word, with a certain behavior, a certain phenomenon, a certain objective. Otherwise, the creature has no way of comprehending. The word itself is meaningless to it. Some animals, this is possible with some animals, uh, which are closer to the human, I guess, or have a higher brain functions. But with other animals, the word is nothing more than a sound. It has the same effect as a sound. And the only data they could decipher would be from the volume or the tone, uh, interpreting as aggressive or soothing, as friend or foe. This is the only understanding they would have of the expression of the word as a sequence of sounds. Therefore, the range of effect of a word, its magical influence, if you will, is limited by the amount of brains that possess the proper means of deciphering, of understanding. And this means associating the word with certain images, certain feelings, certain concepts, or with certain phenomenon. Now, in the case of nihilism, this association is with emotions, with sensations. There is no phenomenon to refer the word to, so it's very esoteric. So the minds have to be primed, have to be prepared, like a computer has to be prepared with the proper software, the proper way of deciphering the computer code. This is the same thing happens with nihilists, with no external phenomenon to refer to. The deciphering of the code happens completely internally. The proper imagery has to be associated with the word, the proper concepts, the proper sensations for the transmission to be effective. So the power of the word is not innate. It has to be prepared. The brains who are going to be influenced have to be primed, they have to be trained, they have to be educated, and only then can the word have an effect. This limits the power of the word. And this is why in nihilism, the only way it could survive, its only use, is within populations that share a common language and a common reaction to specific words. Otherwise, nihilistic meme is completely useless. It's detached from reality, so it has no use outside of this communicability. So its effect is really political. It's psychological. It has no other utility. So whenever we speak of the nihilistic meme, we're talking about a political movement, also masked as spirituality. It's a way of manipulating, triggering certain, like I said, certain feelings, certain sensations in the recipient who has already been prepared for the transmission. We can see this most clearly when we apply the symbol. We express a symbol in as a visual, as a writing, as pure symbol, not as sound. And here we see the limits of the symbol. You can place the symbol in front of an animal that will have no effect. It doesn't understand. It's just lines or shapes. The symbol has no effect on nature directly. Its effect is on minds who then act as agencies, which then affect the world. So the symbol's effect is indirect. It requires an agent to motivate, to manipulate, to exploit, to control, to influence. What the word does is it triggers internal processes. Like I said, data comes into the mind from the cell, from every organ, and all this is governed by a hierarchy, which produces a psychology, a personality. And this is what the word exploits and manipulates. Even if the word refers to nothing external to the brain, the fact that it can stimulate these memories, these stored memories, gives it the illusion that it is something outside of self. So the word comes into the brain from an external source through sound, through some medium, or visually through using light, and then it stimulates things inside the organism. And this, again, gives the illusion to the organism that this is coming from an external source when all it is as a triggering mechanism. The word triggers certain internal processes and directs them. So we might say the word triggers stored memories, which are what genes are. So the meme either adds to the gene or it buries it by triggering certain particular genetic dispositions, particular genetic memories, which because they cannot be conceptualized unless they are given an external image, must seek in the external an abstraction to relate to give it to give it a symbol. And this is how the connection between the symbol and the outside world happens. In the case of nihilistic memes, the connection to external imagery is fragmented. A piece from here, a piece from there, all lacking cohesion, one contradicting the other, because the bonding, the common theme is the emotion, the sensation, in other words, the word now symbolizing the noumenon refers only to other noumenon or groups of noumenon, aggregates of noumenon, which might be incompatible. One noumenon contradicting the other. This is why cohesion is impossible within a nihilistic mind. This is why I've called this schizophrenia. You hold two sets of ideas simultaneously as true, where they all contradict each other. This is how moderns can function on two different levels. Their minds split. The Christian can function as a pious human, a Christian, and most of the time, or within a certain context, and be a vile, vicious capitalist, let's say, in the rest of his life. Or this is how a scientist, or not only a scientist, but all moderns can claim that they believe in evolution theory while then saying that this does not apply to a part of nature, which is the human. So they believe in evolution only up to the point where it applies to humans. And there, of course, they come up with all kinds of excuses, like human complexity and all that stuff. But they're unable to justify it, to explain it. How? They just throw out words as excuses. And this is why, even when they speak about the sex differences, they can't explain why nature only affects the body and yet leaves the mind, the brain, unaffected. When we talk about the power of the word, its influence, its effect, or its magic, we're talking about its range of effect within humanity. This is why, again, moderns, nihilists, when they talk about world, they mean human world. They mean, and when they talk about philosophy, they mean politics. They mean psychology, even though they may then deny that they mean that. Their entire worldview is based on psychology and manipulating other human beings. Their visions, their ideas have no utility outside human interrelationships, human political structures, how people relate to each other, which is the subject of psychology also, and of politics. This is their idea of world. This is, and when they say power, they mean power to the extent that their words have an effect on other human beings. The limit of their power is the amount of humans that understand, that share the language, and within whom the imagery, the proper imagery, is triggered by specific words. So you have to train these people, humanity, to be so triggered. So you have to. This is what they emphasize: education. Education being code for priming, preparing the mind for receiving. This is what I've called being contained within the nihilistic paradigm, where the two poles is the absolute order and absolute nil, both human concepts. So you're trapped within a human construct, and you cannot think outside this paradigm. So whenever you speak with a modern and he talks about philosophy, or he thinks he's talking about philosophy, he's talking about a very small piece of the world, the humanity. And what he means by philosophy, because after a certain point, philosophy has become political philosophy. It's no longer about representing the world as accurately as possible, but now it's about exploiting, manipulating, seducing, convincing humans. The effect, the effect of upon them is the measure of the ideologies, the dogmas, the philosophies, validity, its truth. And given that noumena are always considered absolutes, wholes, because they exist in the mind as such, as simplifications, generalizations, the concept of nihilism become more viable because they always refer to noumenon and their vague conceptions, their vague representations. Ask a modern hypocrite, a nihilist, a liar, to define his words, to explain them, to connect him to the apparent, and he will denounce you. He will angrily reject it. He will laugh at you because, in doing so, first of all, he's probably not capable of doing so because the words, again, are connected to sensations, to feelings, and this is what he seeks in agreement with others upon the a shared feeling, a shared sensation. And by connecting them to the words, the noumenon, to the phenomenon, he will diminish the magic, the appeal, the mystical power of the word. Its range of effect will decrease. and with it, his potential for power. So know that when you want to waste some time discussing anything with modern, a nihilist, under the pretext of discussing about the world, what you're really discussing is human relationships, human political agendas, human emotions, emotional reactions to the world. You're not really discussing about the world objectively. You are discussing about each other's motives, feelings, in other words, subjective stuff. It's a feminine discourse, which is proper since we are living in a feminized world. So there are two general ways to use words, one ascribing to nihilistic memes and one ascribing to realistic memes. One tries to disengage and one tries to engage. One tries to accurately, objectively represent, and the other one tries to reduce it all to sensation, to emotion, to the subjective. And of course, the nihilistic meme is heavily dependent on codependency, even though it uses words such as freedom and love without even being able to define them. And without a sheltering, protective system, it would perish if it were to be applied honestly and directly upon the world, because it's completely detached. The nihilism itself rejects reality. So how can it exist, survive within reality if it rejects it? It only survives again within a sheltered, protective, human environment, and all its concepts, its understanding, is contained within this paradigm, this linguistic paradigm. These two different psychological dispositions create two different attitudes in relation to world. One tending towards it, moving towards world, one moving away from it, detaching from world. One seeking an engagement, one wanting to disengage. And just as with genes, it doesn't matter what memories are stored, or what past is being inherited and passed forward. What matters is how this can survive within the world, can relate to the world. Otherwise, it cannot survive for long. It is a mutation or a code which might not be fit for the world. That's why I've separated words as tools on the one hand, and on the other as toys, as pleasure toys, pleasing, self-pleasing toys, or as ploys, as excuses to disengage, to self-comfort, to soothe self, to escape into self. And in order to make this escape less shameful, the nihilist wants to bring into his world others to reinforce his escape, his esoteric universe, by making others participants sharing in the same meme,